Right, so a piece of video footage has been doing the rounds the last day or two, part of a longer video from Labour conference of last year, which took place between the 8th and 11th of October. So in the immediate days following that Hamas incursion into Israel to seize hostages for exchange deals. So this was well before much of the details were known of what occurred on that night, a point where much of the world was still sympathising with Israel following that event, not yet aware of the atrocities it very much appears that they committed themselves on that night, and well before everything that has followed since in Gaza, of course. The video clip in question features Barking MP Margaret Hodge, a title that works on more than one level in my opinion, grinning, as she was, through an interview for Times Radio with John Pienaar, while stood with her fellow pro-Israel pal Luciana Berger, telling a few home truths that perhaps Berger was wishing she wasn't by the expression on her face, saying that under Starmer, nobody dares speak in favour of Palestine anymore, or at least that was her experience there at Labour conference. But did she just reveal to all and sundry the real attitude of Starmer's Labour towards Palestine here, before we all became far more sympathetic with their plight?
And there are still many here who support the Palestinian cause, some quite strongly and stridently.
I think it's quite interesting. I mean, I've been in and out. There are very few who are daring to very few who are daring to express support. And just I do want to suggest that Luciana was here last time. Do you remember the images of her with the police protection, which was the only way that she could get around conference? Luciana today is here and is being hugged. I mean, I've been sitting with her for half an hour, and the number of people who've come up and given her hugs and kisses is great. So this is a different Labour Party. And I think, Keir Starmer, beyond my expectations, moved in the most ruthless, determined and single-minded way.
He surprised you, Margaret?
Yeah, beyond my... I thought this would all take a decade, and he's done it in 3 years.
Right, so that was a 30-second or so clip of Times Radio's John Pienaar there, speaking with Margaret Hodge and accompanied by Luciana Berger at last year's Labour Party conference, which took place in the immediate days following October 7th. But there was no discussion of condemning Hamas there, you will have noticed. This was about support for Palestine specifically, and Hodge was absolutely beside herself with joy, talking to Pienaar as if he was some old friend instead of a guy looking for a scoop. That Labour members under Keir Starmer, according to her, didn't dare talk about Palestine anymore. At least that was what she was saying she was experiencing at the event, at Labour conference there, that she thought it would take a decade to achieve this, though. And yet Starmer has done it in 3. And that does sort of imply a wider scale of silencing, should we call it, rather than just looking at this Labour conference specifically. Well, what had he been doing for those 3 years then? Purging people like the clappers on often ridiculously weak accusations of being anti-Semitic, retrospectively prescribing various groups as he was, discussing issues the Starmer leadership didn't like, amongst which would have been discussions about the Palestinian occupation. We know Starmer has managed to turn the tide on pro-Palestinian voices because they've effectively been intimidated into silence if they remain in the party, and many of us left in disgust for all sorts of reasons, frankly. But Palestine and Starmer's pro-Israel backing certainly was one of those things. And whilst that has invited accusations of being racist over the past 3 years, ridiculous as that has been, frankly, Israel cannot hide behind Jewish racism to block criticism of it as a state. That ship has now well and truly sailed, given what has happened in Gaza since. However, that was after this video clip, of course, and there's no shortage of things to be appalled by here, as little Labour friend of Israel just kept running her mouth, and you could see the blood draining from Luciana Berger's face as she kept talking, knowing what she was saying was going too far, it seemed, and willing the ground to either swallow her up or Hodge in a bid to get her to shut up. Very few who dared to express support for Palestine, apparently. But then she had to draw attention to Berger directly, repeating the long debunked claims that she needed police protection when she attended conference last time in 2018. And 2018 was the last time Berger had attended a Labour conference, not because she feared for her safety, but because she left the party afterwards, deserting to become part of the ill-fated Change UK, of course, aka the Funny Tinge Party. And after they very quickly collapsed, she joined the Lib Dems and stood for them as an MP in 2019, infamously photographed campaigning as she did so with Blair's spin Dr. Alistair Campbell, now back to singing the virtues of Starmer and Labour as well. Well, The claim Berger needed police protection in Labour conference of that year, though, that went round like wildfire amongst the mainstream media. However, Berger had been regularly photographed out and about around conference there without any supposed escort, and actually police protection only fell into place around her as she left the conference. So she had evidently been allocated some form of a police escort, but only outside the conference. So nice to try bringing that old nugget up again, Margaret, but no dice. But above everything, and coming back to that point she made about how quickly Starmer silenced pro-Palestine voices, and by inference I felt she meant had made Labour a safe space for Jews again, she praised Starmer for being ruthless. And this isn't the first time Starmer's ruthlessness has been praised either. In fact, several of the mainstream media devoted whole comments to praising this as if it is a good quality to have. The Financial Times, as an example, put a piece out last June, in fact, titled Keir Starmer's Ruthless Remaking of the Labour Party, talking about how Starmer has taken over the Labour Party factionally at every level. All the party machinery is all his, mine, mine, mine. But again, they revealed something relating to his view, and therefore his Labour's view, his Labour's view. He does love referring to the party as my Labour, as if he owns it, certainly does control it, and is ruthless in that. The relevant passage from the Financial Times article bears reading. This is what it says. In January 2020, Sir Keir Starmer was asked by ITV News what he thought of Jeremy Corbyn, who was then the Labour Party's outgoing leader. He's a colleague and a friend, he replied. The message Starmer offered in the leadership contest to replace Corbyn was clear, that he would offer a continuation of left-wing economic policies without some of the foreign policy baggage brought by Corbyn, a long-standing opponent of American imperialism, NATO and Trident. He basically said he would be Jeremy Corbyn in a suit without the IRA stuff or Palestine obsession, says one former party aide. So, Palestinian occupation since 1967, the 1948, everything else that we know about since Israel was formed and the impact that's had on Palestine, right up until that article came out, everything to do with Palestine was just Corbynite obsession then. It doesn't really inspire you as somebody with much interest in a two-party state there, for example. As for the casual IRA stuff mentioned there, so often gets brought up, Corbyn was involved in the peace process there, which required talking to Sinn Féin, not the IRA. And it was those discussions which helped bring about the Good Friday Agreement, which celebrated its 26th anniversary just yesterday, and peace to the region. So it's not the attack many people think it is. However, it's little wonder that with epithets like that, throwaway comments regarding Starmer's attitude towards Palestine, that emboldened such uncharacteristic honesty from Margaret Hodge. Well, in her head, anyway. I dare say a politician from a time where she's used to the media covering stories from a certain angle and not have them dissected on social media, no matter how long it has taken for this footage to come to light. As I said, this is from last year's Labour Party conference, but this clip had not been previously published, hadn't done the rounds. It was apparently buried away in a much longer article until it was clipped out. Hodge is, of course, part of Labour Friends of Israel. She's been one of their key figures for years and has continued to accept hospitality from Israel even after this video clip came out, being named in a recent declassified UK article from February of this year as being one of several Labour MPs to have accepted hospitality and to have visited Israel since the genocide in Gaza began. Here's an excerpt from their piece. In January 2024, LFI led a solidarity mission to Israel, which was attended by Labour MPs Christian Wakeford and Margaret Hodge, its spokesperson in the House of Lords Ruth Anderson, formerly Smeath, and former MP Louise Ellman. Hodge accepted £2,500 from LFI for the visit, while Wakeford's register of interest is yet to be updated. Hodge's credentials for benefiting from an apartheid state are impeccable. During the 1970s and 1980s, she profited from her family's business in apartheid South Africa. She later claimed the dividends were given to charities, but could not recall which ones, and decided against selling her shares in the family company. So Starmer had no problem with LFI MPs continuing to visit and support Israel throughout the genocide then, even as recently as January just gone. Hodge's shares in apartheid South Africa are quite another story. But with Israel widely considered an apartheid state too, it is my opinion that her aversion to racism can only be described as selective. It all adds up to a party not moved at all, it seems, by the plight to Palestine and prepared to silence anyone else in the party who might be something that probably won't surprise too many of my regular viewers. But this video does, I hope, go some way to showing how hardened that video actually is, preferring to be pro-Israel with all that says about them. Little wonder perhaps that members are deserting the party in droves, as this video recommendation will tell you all about, begging emails for cash during the rounds. Perhaps they should go cap in hand to Israel instead. It seems they're all far more interested in them anyway. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next video. Cheers, folks.